This Fearless Writing podcast is really about the emotional mastery necessary to write regularly. Emotional mastery is not unlike the craft we have to master, and everybody has to master it, whether you write poetry, personal essay, novel, screenplay, doesn't matter. You got to master the craft, learn your craft, learn it and learn it and learn it. Learn it for your whole life. I still do, and I enjoy doing so. But emotional mastery is different. And it's just, I would say, actually more necessary ultimately than craft mastery. So what is it? Well, in an earlier podcast, I talked about getting in the mood, the challenge of getting in the mood. It's episode number 7, I think. I'll provide a link to it. But getting in the mood is an important part of writing because it's the frame of mind you're in as a writer is different than the frame of mind you're in for the rest of your life, really, where you're interacting with the world. Because again, when you're writing, you're not interacting with anything but your imagination. So that's very important, learning how to shift from the domestic frame of mind to the writing frame of mind. But let's talk about that shift a little bit, even more deeply. Because as I said, the writing frame of mind is very particular. It's really the flow state. But the challenge, one of the challenges of writing is that you watching or listening to this, you're an adult or nearly an adult. And by this time, you have learned to do things regardless of the frame of mind you're in. That is to say, you might do a job and get paid for it. And maybe you're in a good mood or in the flow state while you're bartending or working at the bank or teaching, or maybe you're not. The job still gets done, and maybe you have to rake the leaves. Maybe you're not in the mood, but the leaves still get raked. And whether you're in the mood to rake the leaves, whether you're in the flow while you're raking those things, the yard probably won't look any different. If looking out at the yard, I wouldn't be able to tell probably whether the person who raked it was in the mood to rake it or not. There's no great difference. And in fact, we learn to do a lot of things as adults or throughout our lives that we're not in the mood to do, but we kind of get it done anyway, maybe, or we bitch about it. That's a big part of being an adult, or so it seems. But I'll tell you, I'd rather be in the flow to do anything. I'd rather be in the flow when I'm shopping or raking the leaves or when I was waiting tables. But here's the difference between writing and all those other activities. Again, those other activities, you can do them and not be in the mood to do them. But with writing, as I have said before on this podcast, and this is an important distinction, I can't do it unless I'm in the mood. I have to be in that writing frame of mind in order to do it. And that is what makes it seem, I think, one of the things that makes it seem harder than so many other things we do, where if I'm not in the mood to chop wood, I can still chop wood. But if I'm not in the mood to write, I can't do it. And that is so different than most of what we do in life. I would advise to not actually do anything until you're kind of in the mood to do it, but okay. Or until you get in the mood to do it. Now, as I've said, I don't start in the mood. I have to learn to get into the mood. I understand that that's part of my job. That's part of the emotional mastery. But it is critical to remember that there's nothing wrong with you if you can't write to start. If you feel like you got nothing, if you feel like you can't do this, if you're feeling a little talentless, you're not yet in that frame of mind you have to get into. You have to get into to write. It is so different than the most of what we do in our life. And it is mastery because you have to practice getting into it. Now, the biggest difference between craft and the emotional mastery is that when you learn the craft, you learn it, right? In other words, once you learn that adverbs after dialogue aren't that effective and that nouns and verbs are always going to be more effective than adjectives and adverbs. So you start learning how to do more showing and not telling and on and all the craft things we learn. It's kind of like learning math, right? You just 2 + 2, you memorize it. 2 + 2 = 4. You don't have to do the math to figure out 2 + 2 = 4. You just know it. That's what craft is. Once you learn it, you have it. But the emotional mastery, that's different. It's emotional mastery. Every time I have to sit down to write, I have to find that frame of mind again. Find it again, like finding my balance. It doesn't matter if I found it yesterday. Unlike if I learned some craft rule yesterday, I know it today. No. The confidence, the mastery I need to find today is not quite the same as yesterday. So every day I do it, I have to find it again, find it again, find it again. Because you know what? Every day I write, and every time I find that confidence, every time I find that frame of mind, I grow a little bit, I expand a little bit. So the guy who wrote today is not quite the same guy who wrote yesterday. So I got to find it for the guy today. But that's all right. That's all right. The more I learn how to find it, just like with craft, the writing craft, the more I practice finding it, the easier it is to locate it. And the easier it is to get into that frame of mind, knowing that it changes, knowing that I changed. And it's very satisfying. It's very satisfying to find it and find it and find it every day. That confidence, it's always there. It's always there. And sometimes the not finding it at first, the feeling a little lost, that's part of the gratifying thing. Just like in the stories we tell, we like to make our heroes go through hell to feel the relief of heaven at the end. Sometimes the sitting down and feeling blocked and feeling like you got nothing, and then the breakthrough, and then you're in the frame of mind, and then you're in the mood. The relief. Of course. It was always there. It's always there because that's who I am and that's how it works. And there's nothing to be afraid of. There's just something to practice. Yeah. As always, thanks for listening. If you want to catch every episode, hit subscribe. That's what you do. That's what you do on the internet. And if you like it, say so. I love to hear from you. So till next week, this is Bill Kenower. Stay fearless.